Namaskar and welcome to DGI with Sri and Sri. Today is the 2nd of September, Thursday, and this is episode number 238. Here are the main points. Biden focused on perception of Afghan forces in final call with President Ashraf Ghani. Treasury blacklists Taliban while continuing aid to flow. Israel slams the US plans to reopen embassy in Jerusalem and calls it a bad idea. Putin tells the US has achieved zero in Afghanistan. We want good relations with India and will not interfere in Kashmir, says Taliban's Anas Haqqani. In Afghan news, Biden focused on perception of Afghan forces in final call with President Ashraf Ghani. Now, the Reuters has published a transcript of this conversation. Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. Sridharji, your thoughts on what happened in that call?
My thoughts are it's very interesting. You see this transcript, you see the media report. There seems to have been some exchange which reflects the fact that the Afghan army may not be able to last. That seems to be the conclusion. And Biden seems to have said, look, the perception is that the Afghan army will last the distance. So if that is the case, then, if such a statement has been made, then recorded in the conversation, it begs the question as to whether it qualifies for some kind of, the way the facts are presented relative to the assessment. Should that be the case, whether it qualifies for impeachment remains to be seen. I know Mr. Mitch McConnell believes the otherwise, and Lindsey Graham believes one way. So it remains to be seen, but the conversation and the publication of the Reuters report does cause a bit of a concern, given the situation.
And the Taliban parade U.S. arms and vehicles as Biden defends the pullout. Top Pentagon officials said that it is possible that the U.S. will work with Taliban against the ISIS-K, and a retired General Jack Keane, on the contrary, believes it is possible Taliban and ISIS-K will work together in Afghanistan against allies. So we are having opposing opinions. Defense Department is holding 20,000 Afghans evacuated in the US and 23,000 more evacuated in Europe. Sridharji, a lot happening. We are having opposite messaging coming along. I'm not sure in US sitting halfway across the world, not being familiar with the culture, whether they can differentiate if a particular person belongs to X outfit or Y. That is just my opinion, sir. If a soldier or whatever you want to call these people, if he doesn't like outfit A, that person will go to outfit B. So it's a moot point as to who is where. This is I don't know how they can differentiate one from the other. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, first and foremost, I think the fact that the two sides, there's the retired generals having one view and the current defense generals, current administration or current generals serving in the army having a different view is worrisome. It's inconceivable to assume that whether the Taliban will work against ISIS-K or work with ISIS-K, both remains a mystery. In my view, is to respond to your question, whether you can differentiate, the answer is no, you cannot differentiate. It's impossible. The second issue here is Taliban will do anything to preserve its status quo. So therefore, it will use all tools and techniques and all resources at its disposal to do so. It doesn't either delineate between ISIS-K versus Al-Qaeda versus anyone else for that matter. So it will use every tool and every resource. The planners here to assume one way or the other way is really foolhardy. All of us have been saying that somehow the Taliban will be accountable and will be responsible and is the vehicle, is the party with whom we need to negotiate and work with, runs against the basic theory, because the story is that we have, United States went in to fight Taliban because they sheltered Al-Qaeda. And 2 decades later, we have flipped the coin completely.
Yes, and intelligence said that Kabul will not fall this year as UK Minister Defense evacuation. Now, the Treasury is blacklisting Taliban while it is continuing to allow aid to flow to the country. Now, this is what I think has played out in other countries in the past, like Iraq, for example. The mechanism to get the money in still goes through whoever is in power, according to me. I could be wrong. Sridharji, you've worked with all these things. What are your thoughts?
Now, my thoughts are that any of the aid only goes through anything that is going through the banking system, which I can talk about. Anything that goes through the banking system only gets routed through government nominated agencies. They cannot give money to anybody else because the financial system is accountable. Very similar treasury. They have to channel the funds. The treasury doesn't give money directly. It actually goes through a banking system. The treasury gives it to the banks and the banking system dispenses. It only can go through accredited parties who are registered, who are eligible to receive money. So naturally, as you know, it goes through that process. Now, which means that you're not going to, unless such agencies don't exist currently in Afghanistan, it necessarily goes to the Afghan government. In fact, much of the aid was going through the government for salaries and other types. Other types of disbursements that was going on. Naturally, that without most of Afghanistan was reliant on the U.S. aid. So therefore, they're using the same channels to distribute that wealth. Now, Taliban is now the government. Previously, it was be it Karzai or Ashraf Ghani.
And let's take a look at global news. Israel slams the US plans to reopen embassy in Jerusalem and calls it a bad idea. Tehran says that the 2015 nuclear deal may not resume for 2 to 3 months. Iranian fuel exported to Lebanon without government permission. Let's take a quick look at Israel was the one who was so happy when the United States moved its embassy to Jerusalem. Why is the current government pushing it back, sir? Is it because of its constituents applying pressure on Naftali?
It's basically very simple. I think the statement has been made. They have to have an embassy to have address the needs of the Palestinians. They have made that in the statement. So therefore, that's the strategic purpose which Israel has opposed. Who are all the constituents of the progressives, elements of the progressives which are in the Democratic Party? They represent the Palestinian interests. It's fairly well known. So therefore, I mean, you saw even one of the House representatives making a statement on this specific topic, notwithstanding the fact this is United States, this is not Israel, around this theme. So you can see the entrenched interest now today. It's almost like United Nations is the Democratic Party rather than the U.S. Representing the U.S. House. Yes, that's exactly the reason. And we talked about that there are looming controversies that are going to come out. It's not going to be all hunky-dory as Mr. Naftali Bennett left White House and made his way back to Israel. Now you're seeing the first rumbles coming out, sir.
Iranian fuel exported to Lebanon without the government permission, and Iranian and Nicaraguan leaders pledged joint fight against US sanctions. Sir, how can Iran allow oil to flow without government sanction? I thought all the refineries in Iran were nationalized.
Well, basically, what they're meaning is that it is going through Mr. Nasrallah rather than through the Lebanese, the government. There's no government in Lebanon. They are starved of, oil. They probably for this own, Hamas and Hezbollah activities, they need this oil. So there's a third shipment that has been delivered. How the ships are allowed to pass through when there is a sanction is beyond comprehension. We have also seen, some of the attacks on the other, cruise liners carrying other types of oil, etc., carrying different flags. So, in other words, what we have is a jamboree of, mismatches, and there is no sanctions. China has got Iran major oil deal. You can see oil now flowing into these other Iranian interest areas. You have seen the enrichment. We have talked about the enrichment of uranium, right, from nuclear capable uranium. So what we are witnessing here is that a clownish government or world governments which are at force because they don't know what they're dealing with.
And viewers, I don't know if you all remember, about 3-4 years ago, we had written a piece in PGurus where we had described how barges which were containing illegal crude, meaning crude that has been extracted without the permission of a global body that kind of regulates who should be taking out how much crude. And this crude used to be taken out of Mosul area, and it would find its way down the Turkish through the Turkish countryside, and the barges would be in Mediterranean, and the barges would fill up, and then there is something called as a transponder on every oil tanker, and this transponder is supposed to be continuously transmitting the location to a satellite, and these guys would turn off the transponder and then take out crude from the barge onto little boats, and then come back online once the job was finished, and they would just keep on making big eights, eight in Mediterranean, and this was before the ISIS was completely demolished. That's how ISIS was raising money to run all those territories. Now we are seeing a similar story play out again. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. Egypt, Jordan, and Palestinian to meet to discuss. Is it said? I see PA. I don't know what it is. You can explain, sir. To meet to discuss peace talks with Israel.
PA is Palestinian Authority. PA, Palestinian Authority. Sometimes they're also called. Yeah. So I think what you're beginning to witness is the Palestinians feel they are being isolated by Hamas. So they are taking a much more assertive position and saying that they will work with Israel. They will work with Israel and US. They're trusting US because the present administration has many constituents which are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. So at least they feel that by working with Israel, that there's a possibility to achieve some of their requirements and goals. But they may not be able to achieve all the things that they're looking for, but at least that's the case. Egypt has been a balancing force. Jordan has always been a balancing force. They don't take extremist views. And so now you're beginning to see another coalition. We have touched on this in quite a few of the shows, that this whole thing has become such a kind of a polarizing set of activities. It's very difficult to figure out who is working with whom and whether there is any firm-footed strategic alliance. As it regards to this, then it's very good that these three guys are working together to have some kind of a constructive dialogue and working relationship with Israel.
Yes, and 17 pro-democracy activists have been jailed in Hong Kong for 16 months. Beijing will be playing with fire if it tests US resolve over Taiwan. Sridharji, a little bit more context on this. So they are trying to bury democracy in Hong Kong, and US is now, upping its ante, upping the ante.
US is upping the ante. There is at least growing opinion amongst people who are on ground in the region, expressing the view that China cannot take Taiwan and US inaction as granted, and there will be fierce resistance that will be coming up from United States. So please, don't assume that just by conducting all these drills, etc., that it will be a walkover like Hong Kong. Hong Kong, remember, was handed over to China, okay, and the administration to have this transitional government to continue to work with some pro-democracy. That was the basis by which this was done. Whereas Taiwan is an independent country, notwithstanding the fact everybody accepted the Chinese sentiments that one day it may or may not join. But slowly you are beginning to see the unraveling of this, which is EU we talked about yesterday. We have seen Lithuania and Poland. We have seen some of the other countries giving much more pro-Taiwanese tilt. We saw Japan and Taiwan form a partnership. We also saw India visiting Taiwan. And of course, the Quad nations have always been supportive of Taiwan. So the story is that Taiwan is a different kettle of fish. The pundits or the opinion writers are beginning to say that China cannot afford to take Taiwan for granted. That's what is coming out.
The vaccine diplomacy and other areas of cooperation between Japan and Taiwan draws the ire of China. So it's similar to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
ASEAN needs more border road infrastructure money by way of infrastructure and digital connectivity investments post the pandemic, say ministers in the Shanghai meet. Was there an SCO meet, sir?
No, this is a Shanghai economic meet. This is not Shanghai. This is not the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Council, which is more a security dialogue that happens. This is the ASEAN people met in Shanghai. And so what they're saying is, good, you have a BRI money, please allocate some of that money if you want to work with us so that we can do our infrastructure development in our countries coming out of the pandemic. Whereas the BRI money for BRI purpose may not meet our objectives and there's no strategic interest. That's the message that's going from some of the ASEAN ministers to China.
And Japan and US make climate a pillar of ties as COP26 nears. Suga abandoned snap elections after consultations with party bosses. So in and around Japan, they were up for elections now. But Suga is letting it go. So what happens? There's a term, right? Before the term ends, you have to go for elections again.
No, there was a thing. The term has not yet ended. They wanted to do a quick snap poll. He has consulted. He was trying to change his party leadership. He has had discussions with his party leadership, and they seem to have opined that this is not the right time to do a snap poll, and he would lose out based on the on-ground swell against him, especially as it relates to his whole COVID management and economy.
And Putin tells the United States has achieved zero in Afghanistan. Biden pledges security aid and US support for Ukraine in his first meeting with President Zelensky. France and Germany urge Iran to speedily return to nuclear talks. Now, this is an interesting situation now. Iran is walking away from talks, and Israel has said that Iran is very close to enriching its uranium. So the only conclusion that one can draw, at least I can draw, is that Iran is very, very close to becoming a nuclear power, and they want to use that as a bargaining chip. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think they have come to the conclusion. We have struck a major deal with China, $500 billion. So therefore, you have nothing to offer tangibly by way of the oil import-export restrictions. So that's the first cab out of the window. Second, I'm able to seamlessly move my ships and nobody can stop me. So that's the execution part of it. Third, I'm beginning to trade with some of the countries with what I need. Now you have the Afghanistan. They're also supplying to Afghanistan. So that is out of the window. They believe that they are very far towards the enrichment and probably 90% and very close to acquiring nuclear missile. Now, so what is the purpose of now having a dialogue? So with the international community, there's nothing, because they're already working with other people who oppose this and who are on the opposite side of the political power, most notably China, most notably Russia, and some of the adjacent countries. Iraq facilitated a dialogue between Iran and in Saudi Arabia. You saw that was held in Baghdad, attended even by countries such as Egypt, France, and so on. So you are seeing it's going mainstream under these circumstances. Iran has said, I want this to be delayed by 3 months. By 3 months, once you delay it, then you have a lot more time has been wasted, and you have they may have achieved those objectives that you are alluding to.
And let's take a look at United States news now. Study details cost of terror wars. It's in the 20 years that it has been on, $8 trillion have been spent, and there have been 929,000 deaths. Biden versus Biden. President tone changing over the years on Afghanistan from nation building to new policy. I beg your pardon. Saki claims no one is entering US without getting vetted. Representatives Jim Bank says US to fund it, US will be funding terrorism against itself. So you again have this partisan breakdown. The Republicans are saying we are allowing everybody in. The Democrats are saying no, they are getting vetted. But if you look at the ground reality, people had to flee their homes with whatever clothes they had on them. Even genuine people may not be able to prove their credentials. I'm just, I'm airing what could be a reality, sir. Your thoughts on what is really playing out?
The reality is that there was a mad rush. The people who had SIV or special immigrant visas, they couldn't make it. There's a lot of the people who were in the airport made it. Whether they had documentation or no documentation, it begs the question. Some of the people who came through, whatever identification mechanisms. Now, biometric identification is apparently exists in the as a way of record in the U.S. system. And so I think they discovered somebody was deported who is back. Somebody was identified as alleged committed crimes that he was there. So there is, it's a political statement, which is to say that nobody is allowed into the country without the proper validation. But we have seen this in the porous borders in our southern states. So it would be inconceivable to assume that all of them have been vetted. So what would you do? If you are in the White House press, that's the statement that you're going to issue, and then you find the truth to be different. You're going to apologize. That's the story. So the ground reality is a lot of people have come in, and there's no one who can kind of put their hand in heart and say, everybody has been validated and they have been cleared for security. No.
And Republican Senator Mitch McConnell dismisses Biden impeachment chatter. This is important because Biden is getting support from an unlikely quarter. Your thoughts, sir?
It's very fascinating that as to what exactly is the driving mechanism behind Mitch McConnell saying, well, there are bipartisan Democratic Party members who are saying that there has to be an investigation on this whole exit, possibly driven by their realities of the borderline election outcome that confronts them. So there could be possibly that as well. But the story is that, Mitch McConnell seems to have taken a position. There's no real need for impeachment. I'm not sure anybody buys into it, from Jim Banks to Tom Cotton to Lindsey Graham to, Ted Cruz. Most of the people believe that he eminently qualifies for impeachment, and there has to be at least an investigation. Kevin McCarthy tried to start a process to look at the whole evacuation process. Democrats used their majority in the House and blocked it. And so, therefore, I think Mitch McConnell's statement is very intriguing, to say the least.
14 Democrats break ranks and sign on to the GOP measure of increasing defense budget by $25 billion. Now these numbers are starting to again, lose consequences, because US is throwing money at just about everything, and it appears that suddenly they don't want to put any money in defense. I don't know, sir. With the world looking more dangerous today than it was last week, perhaps, isn't this the right thing to do? Why did the Biden administration hold back on defense funding?
The progressives, or the so-called group, the socialistic communistic group that sits within the Biden administration, doesn't believe even in US Army and US should be spending so much of money as a part of its defense budget. So most of these things that you are seeing is a direct consequence of that thinking that is prevalent. While they are willing to supply money to all kinds of sundry organizations as part of the COVID stimulus, this is appalling that they cannot send money. They cannot supply increase the budget to their own establishment. Now, the people are going to ask the question: why did you leave $87 billion worth of equipment in Afghanistan and walk away? Which probably justifies the progressive argument. There's $100 billion worth of equipment that's been left behind, which could have been used. That on the Department of Defense, they are saying we have major issues in South China Sea. We have major issues now in the North Atlantic. We have issues now as a result of the Afghan withdrawal. So therefore, we need money, most notably to combat some of these looming issues that are threatening us. So there's justified. So which is the reason why the Democrats joined the Republicans in increasing the budget by $25 billion.
And the Supreme Court ruling allowing Texas abortion law to stand sparks reactions on both sides. This is the Roe v. Wade controversy that has been roiling American political discussions for many, many years now. But the way the law stands today, it is the choice of the mother whether to abort her fetus or not. But looks like Texas and a few other states have exception to this rule. Sridhar, just a quick 2-minute overview of this particular law, and then we can talk about what is happening now.
Basically, as you said, to summarize, that the mother has the right. The state, most notably, the Texas law says that, okay, you have the right, but you have no means to exercise that right after 10 weeks. Once a heartbeat has been identified or determined within the womb, then you are killing a living person for which you have no right. That is the ruling that has been granted, and many progressives and left liberals feel this is just the stepping stone for overturning Roe versus Wade.
And Georgia files FOIA in Department of Justice election suit seeking communication with liberal activist groups. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, slams Biden's Rahm Emanuel nomination as deeply shameful. So now you're seeing fissions within the Democratic Party. Rahm Emanuel is considered very close to Biden and Obama. And AOC, who's one of the card holders of the progressive group, is now slamming Biden's appointment of Rahm Emanuel to Japan as ambassador.
The primary objection from her comes from the fact that while he was the mayor of Chicago, he allowed a police officer to get away, the police officer who is supposed to have shot a young person, 12 times, 14 times, some big number. Bullets went through on the back, and there was a hue and cry, and the investigation was sought, and the police officer was to be they demanded police to be suspended. Didn't happen. So she is now harping on that and saying, how can a person with such moral incompetence to be, in her views, not in our views, in her views, to be appointed the Japanese ambassador? So therefore, we don't allow him. This is preposterous decision. So you can see in every facet is the progressive agenda is the yardstick, whether it works or not, is the basis for making their choices. That is not very appropriate, but let's see what Mr. Biden does.
And Biden announces plans to build 100,000 affordable homes. For whom, sir?
For the most needy.
I need a little bit more than that, sir, in the sense, are these citizens of the United States, permanent residents, or are they illegals?
That choice will be made by the progressives, to be sarcastic. Sir, who will be in those houses? There are a lot of people now who qualify. You have illegals, you have legal illegals, you have DACA holders, you have refugees from various states, you have refugees from Afghanistan coming. All of them have to be housed. 100,000 seems to be a very small number. We may end up with about 250 to 300,000 homes. So that is my view. Who we will know as things begin to take shape, it is by lottery, or it is by voting, or it is by virtue of having access to the appropriate constituent in the present administration. That will be the basis by which they will determine who the allocation is, sir.
COVID-19 hospital admissions fall for the first time in weeks across the US, says the HHS in a positive news development. I'm also reading that Costco is going to start rationing their products. So I'm a little mixed news situation, sir.
I know. I mean, what I can say is that we are in a little bit of a mess here at the moment. So therefore, I don't know. I mean, we framed it very well that we have 10 different sets of issues we are dealing with. at any given point of time. And basically, this problem will kind of go on and on and on. And we may come up with various such kinds of schemes because of the disruptions in supply chains, disruptions in on and off. Some states are shut, some states are open. Sometimes you have the issues around the fuel, transportation. So we are going to see all these kinds of vagaries creep into the system as a result of what is going on here.
And let's take a quick look at India news. We want good relations with India and will not interfere in Kashmir, says Taliban's Anas Haqqani. India's foreign minister speaks with his counterpart on the situation in Afghanistan. Speaks with his counterpart in which country, sir?
UK.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Well, I think it's very interesting that Mr. Anas Haqqani has spoken and wants a partnership with India. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to touch Kashmir. So, which is excellent news from an Indian security point of view. I think the Dominic Raab has been making the statement that, look, we need to work with the Afghan. He was part of the transitional negotiation team, which with Qatar. So I think there's a close consultation between India, France, India, UK on because some of these people have to still work. Apparently, still some French and some British people may be there in Afghanistan. So I think they're trying to figure this out. They're also trying to figure out, how to deal with, Britain is similar to India's problem because there's a good chunk of population domestic in those respective in countries. So they have to combat the situation. So they're trying to work out a strategy.
And India to partake in a 17-nation war games in Russia. Vietnam's prime minister to visit India in his first foreign visit, Anwai Chow says, and Minister for External Affairs to visit Croatia, Slovenia, and Denmark from September 2nd to the 5th to strengthen European ties. These are countries who are still finding their feet, except for Denmark, of course. I'm not so sure it's so significant at this point of time, but sir, maybe you can set me straight.
Now, first, I want to respond. The 17 nations, if you get a chance, you read the report. We're short of time here. It's very strange. China and Pakistan are observers. And then you have all these nations around Afghanistan involved, or what you call as the Asian republics of Russia participating in this exercise. And with China and Pakistan will not partake, but they will be the observers. But it's good that India is sending a 200 contingent force to be partaking for whatever purposes that Russia has around this 4 east, west, south, north, the commanders. Now, the question with regard to Croatia and Slovenia, what India is attempting to do is India is trying to build partnership with a number of countries, irrespective of whether they are small or large, to build a part of the coalition. I told you we now live in a polarized world. And by the way, many of these countries may prop up in as part of the 10 members in the United Nations Security Council. Not having any relationship with them is not very good. Okay, so therefore, Lithuania was one of the countries, one of the 10 members in the United Nations Security Council. So I think I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing. I think that's very much needed at this point of time. With regard to Vietnam, this is very interesting. It's his first foreign visit by the Vietnamese Prime Minister, and he's coming to India. I remember just 2 days ago or yesterday, we talked about India supplying medical equipment and supplies to the much needed Vietnamese.
And the Indian Army constructs a 30-kilometer track at an altitude of 18,600 feet to enhance the defense preparedness. A little bit more data on this. Where is this area where it is being?
This is near the Dibruk, Tangsi, Dibruk. This basically helps them to firstly deploy forces, but it connects to the eastern villages downhill around the Pangong Lake. So there's so it shortens the travel time because when you get a chance, if we haven't put the map up, you will see that that there is a large gap that exists, and you require a fairly faster route to get them to the nearest villages. And there's a whole swamp of villages around the banks of the Pangong Lake, on the western banks of the Pangong Lake. So it makes the navigation much easier.
And India's manufacturing sector output moderate in August, fueled by COVID-19 costs. The PMI in August is 52.3 relative to 55.3 in July. In the April to July fiscal 22 quarter, India reigns in 21, I should say. India reigns in fiscal deficit as 21% of budget estimates, and it is confident of keeping the deficits at 6.8% of the GDP. So it is now clear that the pharma industry is probably going to be at the tip of the spear in leading India out of the situation. What is your take on the remaining sectors of the industry, sir, and how do you see this play out?
The core sectors have performed. The 8 core sectors, this power, energy, oil, refinery, all these things have continued to perform. That's one facet which has kept Indian recovery irrespective of the domestic shutdowns. The second one is the exports. They have leveraged the disruptions in the China markets very effectively, and they have reached nearshore with exports that we have been reporting the numbers. Agricultural sector has seen that 14% growth, and there has been exports coming out of that. 3. Then there's also been direct investments by way of capital that has been coming in at fairly very, very good rates. We saw that the run rate in the last quarter was around $23 billion. So this is all propping up in conjunction with the monetization program in terms of the deficit side of the budget, deficit side of the balance sheet. In terms of the economic revival, for it to attain the normal, this is the reason why there was this little bit of criticism around the 20% uptick in the first quarter of FY22. And, which is it's like a chicken and egg. Everybody knows what the situation is, and which is namely that the states have been mismanaging the COVID management cases. Today COVID is back. The active cases is just shy of 400,000. We were talking about the COVID cases falling to below 300,000 just about 5, 6, 7 days ago. I may be looking at the data relatively differently, but the net active cases were about 12,000. That is this morning, 12,000. There's a consistency. All you need is 5, 6 days of 10, 12,000. The cases go up to. And then when you look at the other states, when you take away the top 2, especially the top, which is Kerala, the rest of the states are in a very different magnitude of number. So these are things that are causing the hiccup for the services sector to come back to normalcy. Of course, India is around 54 or 55% active. The net target around the single dosage. I think we covered that yesterday. And you really need that to go up to about 70%. But having said that, August has been an outstanding month for India as far as vaccinations go.
And as India crossed 500 million first doses, August turned out to be a stellar month for vaccinations. You're right. 500 million represents 54% of the adult population, 13.3 million vaccines in a single day. That is, on August 31st was done. 60 million vaccinations in the first 6 days, and 186 million vaccinations in a month at 5.94 million per day. India is clearly climbing the hill for a population of such magnitude. Your thought before we move on to the next section, sir.
I think August has been outstanding. They need to sustain it in September, October, and November. Should they do September, October, and November, I think that India will be back, which is the reason why, again, yesterday we had many market pundits are predicting India's actual GDP will turn out to be higher because of these vaccination programs and the export sector. Service sector has not been factored in as yet into the growth aspects of the GDP.
And let's take a quick look at markets. The Standard & Poor index was flat on Wednesday, while Nasdaq Composite hit another record high. Small cap stocks inched higher, driven by COVID recovery, homes and better economic activity. Russell 2000 climbed 0.6% higher. And let's put up the data now, please, so Sridharji can comment on that. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, so you can see Dow was marginally down, but way up relative to the year's target, 35,312. S&P was a small percentage up, but relatively modest or insignificant. As I said, 4524 went on its way towards 4,700. NASDAQ is always the tech sector fires up. I think you saw Apple and Microsoft doing very well, so 15,309. I think the oil prices, notwithstanding the fact that they are at the 67, 71 band between Brent and oil, crude, it augurs well from the perspective of the economy resuming and the demand coming up. After all, the energy sector also requires capital. $75 is considered the kind of the empirical benchmark. Once upon a time, it used to be $35, but the world has moved. So I think those numbers are pretty good. US, the rates continue to be low. So Dr. Powell has won the day, which is namely to say that the inflation is it can be moderated, and we're going to keep the rates low, and we're not going to increase the rates. And the bond market vigilantes have exceeded. Bitcoin and Ethereum continues to grow. Bitcoin was up $2,347 yesterday. Again, I'm still standing by the prediction around somewhere between $60,000 to $65,000 at the minimum to finish by end of the year. We still have 4 months left.
And with that, we come to a close of today's episode. Do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And we'll be back again on Sunday morning. We're going to be doing a weekend recording because as last week, we are not going to have a Friday session. We'll have the session airing on Sunday morning, and we'll be back again. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining, and namaskar.
Namaskar. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you on Sunday.